In this episode, I have Hungarian money laundering expert András Bácsfalvi to talk about the AML scene in Hungary. He's also a fellow podcaster, so we talk about his podcast.
This is Bart Peterson, and you are listening to the FCPA Compliance Report on the Compliance Podcast Network.
The FCPA Compliance Report is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, and welcome back to another episode. Today, I have with me András Bácsfalvi. András is a fellow podcaster. He's also from Hungary. So I saw a podcast he did with Michael Ryder-Gordon on Wirecard, and I thought, wow, another podcaster talking about Wirecard, but from Hungary. So I contacted him and asked him if he would come on my podcast. His podcast is called The Different Lines. So András, first of all, with that incredibly long-winded introduction, welcome and thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me today.
Thank you for having me, Tom.
András, could you tell us a little bit about your professional background?
I graduated at the Budapest Corvinus University with a master's degree in economics and sociology. Having the opportunity of getting an insight into sociology, social psychology, the structure and operation of different enterprises and organizations made really a great impact on my career. Since 2016, I've been the Chief Compliance Officer of MKB Bank, which is one of the biggest financial institutions in Hungary. And before my present workplace, I worked for the Hungarian Export Credit Agency as a compliance director. Maybe it is also important that I've been the president of the Hungarian Banking Association's AML working group since 2016 and the president of the Compliance Working Group since 2018. And I'm also a member of ACAMS since 2016. And and most importantly, I'm the father of the cutest 7-year-old boy.
Well, I'm the father of the cutest 23-year-old girl, so perhaps we've got the boys and girls covered here. Could I ask you, András, how did you initially become interested in compliance?
2010, I joined Constitution Protection Office. This is one of the Hungarian authorities as an operation officer. I cannot talk about my tasks in detail, but I can share that as an economist, I worked at the Department of Economic Security. And I can tell you that my job was quite fascinating. While working in a military organization, I gained valuable experience and acquired new skills such as discipline and professional humility. Having this job marked a significant turning point in my career, as this was the place where I first met topics like fighting corruption, unethical business conduct, and economic crime, which really captivated me from the beginning. And in the beginning of 2013, the CEO of Exim Bank asked me to bring compliance into existence. And I can tell you that the everlasting romance started.
Well, I'm also in that everlasting romance with compliance myself, so I certainly understand. If I could turn to a phrase I've heard before, but ask you the acronym MLRO, what does that stand for, and what role does it fulfill in a compliance program?
MLROs, so money laundering officers, are the fundament of the AML risk strategy of a financial institutions. The role involves high responsibility. MLROs must propose strategic decisions about activities relating to money laundering and financial crime, as well as they have to follow the national and international trends in order to provide adequate AML answers to the changes. Allow me to name 4 everyday tasks. Regulation. I think it is indispensable to follow the changing acts and constantly monitoring the critical legislative changes. MLROs should issue circulars to the business relating changes affecting their daily work. It is also very important to participate in projects which have any kind of AML relevancy, like online account opening, online personal loan, or whatever. And it is, of course, important to supervise all AML-related operational tasks.
András, I was wondering if you could tell us 2 or 3 of the top challenges either you faced or really the anti-money laundering compliance profession faces in Hungary today.
We do have 2 national sports in Hungary. The first and the most popular one is football, which we used to play on quite high level. The second one is tax evasion, and we are still pretty good at it. Hungary is a cash-intensive country, and despite of the pandemic situation, this behavior didn't change significantly. 3 years ago, our AML department reviewed the so-called cash-in-back service, and as a result, we identified several clients as risky in terms of this type of service. So the contracts for cash-in-back service with these clients were terminated, and now the AML department reviews the existence of the existing contracts annually. By implementing cash-in ATMs, the personal contacts have decreased, and now we have less opportunity to contact directly our customers in order to apply the KYC principle, and it is now more difficult for the branch workers to identify a straw man, just to give you an example. And we should support our branch workers so we should support them to make them know how to handle these kind of customers. And last but not least, it is also important that Hungary's geographic position is favorable for companies from non-EU countries, as Hungary is located on the border of the EU and the East and the West. So it can happen that companies coming from third countries wants to open an account here in Hungary and step their foot in this region. I cannot highlight you enough that MKB Bank's non-resident clients always have to prove the Hungarian nexus. So we do not support the establishment of customer business relationship with natural persons or legal entities who do not have any Hungarian relationship. But I can tell you that the need is there, especially from Russians.
So that's very interesting, both of the challenges, both on really the local level and if I could say the international level as well, is that you and your colleagues see a robust national response to anti-money laundering as critical for the continued business success of in Hungary and attracting investors from across literally the world. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I really also enjoyed your remarks about the second most favorite sport in Hungary. And the challenge...
I like football better, to be honest.
Most of us do as well. But in the United States, in many ways, we're moving away from a cash economy to either a bank card, in many cases, Apple Money or other types of payment systems that consumers are using at businesses, restaurants, et cetera. And does the Hungarian continued use of cash, does that bring up any problems or issues on the international front, or is it really unique to Hungary itself?
I don't think it's unique to Hungary. It's typical at this region, and of course we follow the path you mentioned, but we still face the problem that there's lots of cash in the pockets of the customers, and we have to deal with it somehow from the AML point of view. So I think it's a typical Center Eastern European issue. I don't think it's typical just to Hungary.
If we could move to sort of what I would call the compliance scene in Hungary, how would you assess the current compliance scene, at least around anti-money laundering compliance, as you see it from your position in Hungary?
I think there shouldn't be big differences between the assessment itself all around the world, because, Hungary is a member of the European Union, and as such, we should do almost the same like everyone else in this community, which is not surprising because the same EU directive applies to us like anyone else. I think the core component of a strong AML program should be first, the transparent and clear regulation. This is very important. I think the operation of an effective control system is also crucial. So the goal is to create controls that allow the AML area to monitor the full compliance and enforcement of AML measures. I think we should apply the proper KYC principle. This is one of the most important one. Though I always say that it used to be KYC, know your customer, but today sometimes I feel it's rather CYA, cover your ass, what we have to do. So it is also important to have full customer due diligence and continuous monitoring of the customer relationship. And of course, we should operate an appropriate AML and sanction screening system. But if I should mention just one difference to the others, it would be the fact that we should be better and more compliant than the big EU countries, because as a small and economically not so important country, we cannot afford ourselves to make a mistake. Just to give you an example, our common friend Mikhail told me that some colleagues of the German supervisory authority possessed Wirecard shares. It is absolutely unimaginable in Hungary. So the colleagues of the Hungarian supervisory authority are strictly forbidden to have any kind of financial instruments, and not just the companies they supervise. And they are not just strict to themselves, but they supervise us very rigorously, I can tell you.
I'd like to now turn to your podcast, The Different Lines. If I could ask why you started it, who is your audience, who are some of your favorite guests, and where do you see you and your podcast going forward?
In Hungarian, it is called Védelmi Vonalak, so the defense lines. And it is Hungary's first podcast on the control functions in banking, insurance, and corporate sectors. I started it because there wasn't any like this, and I started it, to be honest, because it entertains me. We cover topics from the field of compliance, anti-money laundering, IT security, fraud prevention, risk management, and internal audit. Unfortunately, I'm not as productive as you are, but I try to do my best. So I have 1 or 2 new episodes in a month, and these are mainly recorded in Hungarian, but to bring international knowledge to the show, every 3rd or 4th episode's language is English. My guests are mainly well-experienced professionals, but I interview also business leaders, CEOs, supervisors, and legislators as well. And regarding my audience, I think they came mainly from the banking, insurance, and corporate sectors. And let me brag you here a little bit. The average audience is between 500 to 2,000 per episode, which is quite good given the fact that these are mainly in Hungarian and not about puppies or celebrities. So I think this number is something I'm proud of.
Well, you should be, because I would be proud of those numbers.
Oh, thank you. Really?
Those are very good numbers.
Because I
Yes. 2,000 an episode is very good.
This was the maximum. Of course, I told my mother and my sister to listen to it, but it is just two. So,
Well, congratulations.
the others must be. Thank you.
If I could maybe turn to some questions about the future, and you had some really interesting remarks about how the past year of the coronavirus health crisis has not changed the way Hungarians do business. But I wanted to ask, has the pandemic changed the way your bank has had to approach AML compliance, or if you have perhaps given new or different guidance over the past year?
The compliance function plays an important role in the institutional realization of prudent operation, even after the declaration of the state of emergency, as in carrying out its wide-ranging general tasks. And in sudden and dynamic circumstances, we must demonstrate our ability to adapt quickly but prudently. It was quite challenging for us to keep up with all the new measures introduced by the government, the Hungarian government, to develop forward-looking strategies to identify and manage the emerging risks. We had to be ready to respond to developments in the field of capital markets, to the new challenges of anti-money laundering, or the increased role of consumer protection expectations as well. And since compliance is striving to deliver proactive solutions to ensure compliant business processes at all times, we had to keep an eye on the changing international monitoring trends in an uncertain and dynamic regulatory environment, and had to find and apply the best market practices. Now, I can proudly tell you that we were successful, and I can tell you that we are stronger than ever. Just to give you an example, we had to support creating special working conditions. Since I'm not just an AML officer, but I'm the compliance officer, I will give you an example from a different compliance perspective. So we played an active role to find safe and legally acceptable solutions in respect of home office condition for critical functions of the bank, like treasury trade and treasury sales, with the continuous operation as a top focus. And the demand for the banking sector to play an active role in the mitigation of the negative economic effects of this very situation, as well as the need for quick and effective adaptation, gave compliance an enhanced importance with the organization. So I can tell you that the importance of compliance increased, and this is how it should be.
Now, if I could turn to perhaps 5 years down the road or even further, what do you think that both financial institutions and even corporations need to be thinking about regarding AML compliance in 2025 or even beyond?
As technology leads the world competition of development, financial institutions face a huge gap in technological tools for the fight against money laundering. The tool that can evolve anti-money laundering activities is artificial intelligence. This humankind logic interface can change the entire role and the structure of an AML department. One of the most important advantages AI can generate is to monitor customer activity through algorithms rather than using trained employees to undertake these tasks. And I think AI can be particularly useful for detecting unusual single transactions by using systems to build up an image of normal customer behavior and creating an alert when something unusual arises. I think this is the newest level of KYC. And I believe that the field where AI can significantly transform the financial sector is the battle against financial crimes. It has the potential to reduce the number of false positives in monitoring systems, so the efforts of human experts could be redirected to other and more productive areas of suspicious activity. It is maybe also important to mention that though the communication between FIs, so financial institutions, and FIUs has improved, there's still no official fast and direct communication channel, so it must be improved. And my point here is that a single transaction monitoring system would be not enough anymore. So I think we need some better solution. So to sum it up, I strongly believe that by combining the right compliance kit with a well-trained compliance department, a company can achieve numerous benefits and can operate towards higher productivity and better market performance. So the expectations are high, and I think compliance can support these expectations.
Unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode, but I was wondering if any of our audience wanted any more information on the topics you've talked about, or if they wanted to check out your podcast, where could they go?
Those who are interested in a compliance guy coming from a small but great country can find me on LinkedIn. And my podcast, this Védelmi Vonalak, or the Defense Lines, is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and on every similar platform.
We're going to link to your LinkedIn profile and your podcast in our show notes so our audience can check those resources out. I wanted to thank you for taking the time to visit with me. It's always great to talk to a fellow podcaster. I congratulate you for starting and continuing your podcast. And I hope that I might be able to call upon you in the future to discuss the ever-evolving Hungarian AML compliance scene.
Of course you can, and I can't tell you how honored I am for having me here. I'm thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox again. I'd like to thank you for listening to this episode of the FCPA Compliance Report, a production of the Compliance Podcast Network. We have a great new show on the Compliance Podcast Network called Mo Forecast, which is a podcast of the law firm of Morrison & Forster, hosted by James Koukios. Check that out on the Compliance Podcast Network. Also, we have a new podcast, Survive and Thrive, where with my co-host, Courtney Nordrum, we take a look at compliance disasters, some of the lessons learned and red flags missed, plus what you can do to avoid them going forward. I know you'll enjoy this great new series, Survive and Thrive, which posts every other Tuesday on the Compliance Podcast Network. Thanks so much for listening, and I look forward to visiting with you again next week.